Does your meat need some time in the jacuzzi? Or should it take a cold shower? Should it chill on the counter or take a spin in the microwave? Here's how to treat your frozen meat. There's one thawing method that exceeds all others, and likely takes the cake as both the safest and most reliable way to thaw meat. If you've got plenty of time to plan ahead, nothing beats placing frozen meat on a dish or in a sealed container and letting it defrost in the fridge on the bottom shelf. After all, letting meat defrost in the fridge keeps it at a consistently safe temperature while thawing, which drastically reduces the risk of food poisoning, according to the USDA. More than anything else, thawing meat in a refrigerator ensures the food remains outside of the so-called danger zone for microbial growth, which occurs between 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Since the ideal fridge temperature is around 37 degrees according to Consumer Reports, there's little to no concern about dangerous foodborne pathogens proliferating on your meat while it thaws in the fridge. Why the bottom shelf? This will diminish the chances of any liquid from defrosting meat contaminating other food items. After all, raw meat juices can be full of potentially harmful bacteria, and it's just unappealing to see a thawing steak's blood-red juices dripping down onto your eggs and vegetables.
Ugh. Disgusting. God, what a mess.
There are plenty of potential ways to take an ice-cold, frozen solid piece of meat and make sure it ends up completely thawed. But given the inherent risk of bacteria growing on meat's surface as it defrosts, some methods, like thawing in hot water, simply aren't worth the risk. The USDA clearly states one should never thaw meat in hot water due to the risk of foodborne pathogens developing during the process. But in addition to the health concerns brought on by this method, thawing meat in hot water can lead to issues with the meat's quality as well. Thawing in hot water may cause a meat's exterior to start cooking while the interior remains frozen, which severely reduces the chance of creating an evenly cooked, tender end product. If you're pressed for time, you may be tempted to throw caution to the wind and toss a frozen piece of meat in hot water to quickly defrost it. But seeing as there are other time-friendly and safe methods, it's clear why using hot water is one of the worst ways to thaw meat. This includes putting your frozen meat in the dishwasher. It should probably go without saying, but don't try everything you've seen on TikTok. This method has all the risks associated with hot water thawing, with the added bonus of just being gross and weird. Not all water thawing methods are bad. Submerging frozen meat in cold water belongs among the best ways to thaw meat, as long as you keep it in an airtight, water-sealed container and make certain the water remains cold the entire time, according to the USDA. Obviously, considering the danger zone temperature for bacterial growth, it's crucial the water used for defrosting meat remains below 40 degrees when thawing this way. This can be done by consistently checking the water's temperature and changing it if necessary, according to Michigan State University. The National Restaurant Association Educational Foundation says that you can bypass the need to check the water's temperature by using flowing cold water instead. Just be sure to keep the meat in a sealed container to avoid waterlogging it and lower the odds of contaminated water leaking and spreading around. Running water isn't without its risks, though. One of the main reasons to reconsider thawing meat under running water without packaging is the danger of the bacteria splashing onto items around the sink and contaminating your kitchen in the process, according to the CDC. In fact, while running frozen chicken under water may eventually thaw it out enough to cook, it doesn't remove any potentially harmful microbes, according to the University of Wisconsin. One study showed bacteria was still present on raw poultry after rinsing it 40 times, and there's a fair chance your chicken will be contaminated.
In fact, the USDA allows 9.8% of whole chickens it tests to be contaminated with salmonella.
What about warm water? According to America's Test Kitchen, you can actually safely defrost smaller cuts of meat in water around 140 degrees. There are several key points to keep in mind when thawing meat in warm water. Notably, the cut of meat should be an inch thick or less. Just like with cold water, you want to monitor the temperature to make sure it doesn't get too hot and make sure that the meat is in a sealed enclosure of some type. You should also make sure that it doesn't remain in the warm water for too long. America's Test Kitchen suggests leaving frozen meat in warm water no more than 45 minutes to reduce the risk of it starting to cook or growing bacteria, though the length of thawing time will change depending on the meat. We can't pretend we've never defrosted a piece of meat on the counter before, but according to the USDA, you should never thaw meat at room temperature if you want to completely avoid any risk of food poisoning. Now, there may be a chef or two who scoff at the notion and can't understand why this thawing method would be listed among the worst ways available. Many chefs believe it's blasphemy to put cold meat in a hot pan and encourage letting meat sit out to warm it up to room temperature before cooking. But letting a fully thawed piece of meat sit at room temperature for a short period of time before cooking is far different than allowing it to defrost for hours on end. After all, raw meat can stay relatively safe for consumption if left at room temperature for up to 2 hours, or only 1 hour if the temperature is on or above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. But any longer than that, and the chances of consuming spoiled or bacteria-ridden meat is too great to risk. Some of the best ways to thaw animal proteins aren't necessarily applicable to each and every type of meat. Case in point, the two-pot thawing method, which appears mainly feasible for quickly defrosting a piece of steak through the process of conduction in as little as 5 minutes. In addition to the swift speed with which steak thaws through this technique, the two-pot method is also supremely easy to execute. You'll need 2 metal pots. Turn one upside down and place the frozen, packaged, sealed steak on top. A second pot, filled with room temperature water, is stacked on top of the steak. From there, leave the steak between the pots until you're ready to cook. If you're in a bind for time, this thawing method may do the trick, as well as make you wonder why you ever bothered with a slow, standard defrosting technique in the first place. If we were only presenting the safest ways to thaw meat, then using the microwave would undoubtedly slot in as one of the best ways for defrosting. But while thawing meat in the microwave is perfectly safe according to the USDA, it's also quite likely to result in one of the least appetizing meals in the process. For all the undeniably helpful ways that a microwave can be used, there's ample reason you'll want to reconsider the defrost button, particularly when it comes to thawing meat. As Chef Rachel Arty told Reader's Digest, the problem with thawing meat in the microwave is that it may start to cook the item on the outside while it remains cold and frozen inside. Not only is this not super efficient, but it can make cooking the meat more difficult. In other words, if you're hoping for a perfectly tender, juicy, and evenly cooked piece of meat, skip the microwave when thawing your protein. Unless you're interested in eating a meat popsicle of some sort, you're probably only looking to consume meat once it's fully cooked. But that doesn't mean your eventual meal needs to be thawed entirely before you start the cooking process. In fact, if you're using a slow cooker or a pressure cooker, one of the best ways to thaw meat is not to thaw it at all, according to a study by Michigan State University. While there's little to no food safety risk if you start your cooking process with frozen meat, some cooking methods are likely to doom the food item before it hits your plate. You can't expect a frozen piece of meat to cook evenly if you utilize a high-heat, quick cooking technique. But if you use a frozen piece of meat in a slow cooker or a pressure cooker, it greatly lowers the risk of ending up with an unappetizing, uneven final product. Not only that, but these cooking techniques ensure meat remains outside of the danger zone range while going from frozen to fully cooked.